Welcome everybody to Miss Compton's math class. Today we're going to focus on estimating, but more specifically on rounding. And I wanted to start out just talking a little bit about the difference between when you estimate and when you round. When you estimate, they usually do not give you a specific place that you're going to round to. They do not give you a specific place value spot to round to. You might see words in word problems like about how many will be left, or approximately what would be the total of the girls' cookies that were sold, or whatever. Sometimes they might even use that word estimate. Estimate the solution to this problem. Okay, so when you estimate, they don't usually give you a specific place to round to. You have to just kind of figure it out. So for example, if we had the number 365, we would look at a number line to help us figure out, is it closer to 300 or 400? So I would go ahead and I would put 350 in the middle, and then I would see on a number line that 365 is about here, just estimating or guessing. So if I were to pick 400 or 300 that it were closer to, I would have to round up in this case to 400. So 365 would estimate to about 400. Let's look at rounding. When you round, they give you a specific place that you're going to round to. Maybe they're going to say to the hundreds place. Maybe they're going to say to the tens place. Okay? They are going to give you a specific place that they want you to round to. Now, we're going to be looking at decimals and rounding today. You already know how to round whole numbers. We are going to do the same thing with decimals. I'll show you some examples in just a second. When we round, the first thing I like to do is teach my students this little poem just to help us remember. And it says, find your number, look next door. When you look next door, you're going to look at the right. If it is a 4 or less that you're looking at, you keep that first number the same. I'll explain this better in just a second. So 4 or less, give it a rest. 5 or more, you're going to add one more. Okay? So for example, if I have the number 3,241, and they want me to round to the tens place, okay? The first thing I do is I find my number. The number that I'm going to circle is whatever I'm rounding to. So in this case, it's the tens. So I find my number, which is here. I look next door to the right. Okay, before I do this, I'm going to make a bubble map on my 4. It is either going to stay a 4 or turn to a 5, because I either give it a rest, which would keep it a 4, or I add one more and make it a 5. Okay? So this is the number that we change. We just look here to tell us, do we change it or not? Okay? So I look next door. It's a 1. Is that 4 or less or 5 or more? Well, it's 4 or less. So I'm going to give it a rest. So it's going to stay a 4. Sorry about that, guys. I just had a little interruption. Okay, so back to our bubble map. We figured out that next door was a 1, so we're going to keep it a 4. So when we go to rewrite our number, we put a 4 in the tens place. Everything after this digit is going to become a 0, and everything in front stays the same. So if I were going to round 3,241 to the tens place, it ends up being 3,240. Let's do another one. Here's the next example. 3,257. We're going to round it to the hundreds place. Okay, so go back to your poem. You're going to find your number, and we're going to circle it and do our bubble map. It's either going to stay a 2 or become a 3. You look next door. It's a 5. Okay, so is that 4 or less, give it a rest? Or 5 or more, add one more? Well, it's 5 or more, so we have to add one more. So that 2 is going to change to this 3. Everything after it becomes a 0. Everything in front stays the same. So 3,257 rounded to the hundreds is 3,300. It works the same when you round to decimals. If I have the decimal 5 and 236 thousandths, and we're going to round it to the tenths place, same thing. You find your number. Okay, this is the tenths, this is the hundredths, this is the thousandths. So find our number, which is here. It's either going to become a 2, stay a 2, or become a 3. We look next door. It's a 3. So is that 4 or less, give it a rest? Or 5 or more, add one more? Well, it's 4 or less, give it a rest. So that number is going to stay a 2. Everything after it becomes a 0. Everything in front of it stays the same. So if I round 5 and 236 thousandths to the tenths place, it becomes 5 and 2 tenths, because you can leave those zeros off if you'd like. Let's just do a couple more. 5 and 324 thousandths. Let me just check something. And we're going to round this one to the tenths place. So again, you find your number. Here it is. Bubble map it. It's either going to be a 3 or become a 4. Find your number. Look next door. It's a 2. So is that 4 or less, give it a rest? Or 5 or more, add one more? Well, it's 4 or less, give it a rest. So it's going to stay a 3. Everything after it becomes a 0. Everything in front stays the same. Now, since it's a decimal, you can technically leave off the zeros because the value of the 3 is still 3 tenths, even though we add 2 zeros. Okay? The last tricky one I kind of wanted to show you was when they say nearest dollar. When they say nearest dollar, that is the $1 space. If you were to write $1, where would you put that dollar? Right here, in the ones place. Okay? So the nearest dollar is usually the ones place. So we're going to, again, find our number, which is right here. It's going to either be a 4 or a 5. I do my bubble math. I look next door. It's an 8. So is that 4 or less, give it a rest? Or 5 or more, add one more? Well, that's 5 or more. So we're going to add one more. Get rid of that 4. So now, this 4 is going to become this number here, 5. Everything after it becomes a 0. $5. I hope that helps you.